past 3 decades have seen a remarkable rise of Afrikaners in business. Today, many of these Afrikaner tycoons are competing internationally. Fortunes describes how these and other business leaders such as Jannie Mouton, Douw Steyn, Roelof Botha and Hendrik du Toit and a number of commercial farmers built their empires. For more, we're joined by author Ebbe Dommisse. Ebbe, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
So let's talk about the inspiration behind the book. What were you trying to convey to the reader?
Well, I was approached by Jonathan Ball, who read an article about Boere billionaires, and he approached me to write a book about it. He thought there was a book in it. I started looking around and I thought, well, maybe it has a point. And then I started interviews. And what really inspired me was, in spite of the what one would perceive to be a big trouble for Afrikaner business people after 1994 turned out in the opposite direction. They were really making a big success and contributing in a tremendous amount to the country. And I thought that's a good way to start the book. Of course, there was also severe setbacks like the collapse of Steinhoff. And so I tried to convey as impartially as possible what was happening in Afrikaner business circles. And then also I had a good look at the mega farmers who farm on scale and export, and they are very successful. And I think they are a mainstay also of the South African economy today.
Take us through the process of putting the book together, the research, conducting the interviews. How long did that take?
It was much longer than I anticipated. It took about 3 years. It's quite difficult to get hold of all of these people, and then you need a comprehensive research, about their background, their friends, their acquaintances, and to get a really whole picture of what was happening. So it did take a long time.
During your research of putting the book together, what myths and misconceptions did you encounter about Afrikaners when it comes to, certain myths about their supposed backwardness?
Yes, that was an interesting concept, which wasn't really based on fact. If you go back in history, up to 1806, the farmers were, basically it was a farming community, and they were supposed to be very backward, which is exactly not true. Research by Stellenbosch University showed that these farmers actually had about the same amount of cattle and sheep as farmers in Holland and in North America, in Chesapeake country. Their inventories were investigated. And secondly, they had quite an impressive cultural heritage. They started the Cape Dutch style of building in the Western Cape. They had books and they had paintings which showed that they were not backward at that time. Later on, of course, because of the devastation of the Rinderpest and the Anglo-Boer War, which was, that was a disaster for South Africa, many became impoverished, and about 300,000 after in the depression of the 1930s were poor whites. So it was a dual story. Some were very poor and supposedly backward, while others were really leading the way in making a good living in South Africa.
What would you say is the main theme with all the Afrikaner tycoons that you featured in this book?
I think, firstly, there's interest in how did these people manage, in spite of quite extensive social engineering and policies like BEE, affirmative action, and the cadre deployment. How did they manage to succeed? There's the human interest stories. How do they live? And what drives them? I think it's a spirit of enterprise. The entrepreneurs are doing very well. And secondly, they were assisted, of course, by the 1994 settlement. And that opened up the whole world for these business people and for the farmers. And there's extensive covering of what they managed to do. And I think quite a lot of people that talk to me, they are very interested in how they managed to do this and while they are still succeeding.
Ebbe, before I let you go, just quickly, one entrepreneur in this book that inspired you.
Could you repeat that?
One entrepreneur or the one Afrikaner tycoon who inspired you that you featured in this book.
Who I featured in this book?
Yes. Which entrepreneur would you say inspired you?
Oh, I think quite a few of them. You look at Machila Roux, who started banking for the poor. It's a huge success story. And it shows that, I quote one of the communist members of the ANC saying, it's surprising that people at the SASA points have so much difficulty, but if you walk into Capitec, you get personal attention and they attend to the poor. He's one of them. A few others, Francois van Niekerk, the philanthropist, he was shown by Forbes magazine to be the biggest philanthropist in Africa. And there's quite a few others that I thought were really, Marty Besson and Christo Wiese, who started out in Africa, the biggest clothing and food retail merchant in Africa. I mean, these people should be an inspiration to everybody in the country.
Ebbe, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That is Ebbe Dommisse, talking to us about his book titled Fortunes, The Rise and Rise of Afrikaner Tycoons. That's it from me. More news with my colleague Nompumelelo Sizeba, and we also have your weather details after the break.